right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this Transportation Committee meeting to order. As a reminder, this is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who couldn't join us today in person and is being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn on your mic before speaking so that those online and in the room can hear you. And also a reminder just to state your name, especially for those who are joining us online. I would like to welcome, we have a new member today, Amy Reinell from the Active Transportation Alliance. So I'd like to welcome you on board to the committee. This seat was recently vacated by the Center of Neighborhood Technology. So welcome, Amy. And let's go around the room. We'll start off with some introductions today, and I can start. I'm Kevin Carrier with Lake County.
Good morning, Tara Orban from Cook County.
Aaron Alaman, CMAP.
Jeff Shriver, CDOT.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kane County.
Christina Kupkowski, Will County.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
Chris Hebert, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
George on behalf of Kendall County. Todd Schmidt, FHWA.
Tom Vanderwood with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Lynette Civarella, Metra.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Steve Travia, DuPage County.
Jack Cruikshank, Illinois EPA.
Karen Robles, Illinois Tollway.
Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, Council of Mayors.
Thomas Bemonte, subbing for Audrey at MPC. Scott Hennings, McHenry County.
Katie Hurtis, IDOT District 1.
Amy Reinell, Active Transportation Alliance.
Mark Kane, Federal Transit.
Megan Swanson, IDOT. Victoria Barrett, CMAP.
All right, if we can go around the folks in the audience today too, and then we'll jump over to CMAP staff after that.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Joe Sordam, Lake County Council Mayors.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT.
Mike Clemens, Lake County DOT.
Leslie Rower, South Suburban Mayor's Manager.
Gretchen Clark, Kane Kendall Council Mayors.
Brittany Mattias, Southwest Conference of Mayors.
Eric Chernato, Northwest Council of Mayors.
Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors. Brian Larson, North Shore Council of Mayors.
Russell Petroviak, CMAP staff. Alex Beata. I think we're all CMAP, so we'll let that part go.
John Carpenter. Doug Ferguson.
Ryan Gugis.
Kiama Dobbs.
Ryan Tomto.
Julie Reschke. Sarah Stolpe.
Martin Menninger.
Jen Miller.
George Rivera.
Richard Norwood.
Harris, CMAP.
And then Doug, I don't know if you want to go through the online participants today.
All right, just give me 1 second. I have to make the list bigger. All right. See. Let's just skip that for right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of people online. We'll go through and skip that today. So that's all the folks that we have at the meeting today. Moving on to item 2, agenda changes and announcements. There are no agenda changes today. Do we have any announcements from any committee members? All right, seeing none, moving on to item 3, approval of the minutes. We have before us the draft minutes from our December 20th meeting. Do I have a motion to get those meeting minutes presented?
Mayor Rockingham, so move.
Motion by Mayor, a second. Amy Lee on CMAP, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item 4, Erin is with us today. She's going to give us an update on the CMAP agency and the board activities. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning. I know you all showed up to see me this morning, so thanks for coming. I also want to extend a warm welcome to Amy Reinell, who's joining us. Amy, did you want to say a couple words about yourself and Active Transportation Alliance for folks who don't know you in the room?
Thanks, Erin. We are working to make our region a great place to walk, bike, and take transit. So we mostly work on advocacy with our partner agencies in the room, as well as in a lot of towns and cities around the region and state policy. So kind of hitting all the different change points.
And just a point for this committee, the Center for Neighborhood Technology is still represented on CMAP committees. Nina Idamudia, their executive director, sits on our board, and so we are still have sort of that coverage and input from them as well. I am happy to share some updates from the CMAP team, given that this is our first meeting since, I believe, November of last year. I wanted to briefly spend some time discussing the impact of some of the executive orders that have come out recently and their impact on our work and items that are relevant to you all here today. I'll say that this is evolving and it's required sort of a little bit of attention for us to make sure that we're understanding the complexity of what's going on. And even yesterday, we received some preliminary guidance on things that related to the STIP and the TIP. So I'll get to that in just a minute. But I will say, you know, there are a number of ongoing lawsuits related to a number of these issues as well. And so what we may know today may not be as clear as we'd like it to be. And so that's an uncomfortable spot to be in. But we are going to try and do our best to make sure that we keep up on things by connecting with our national associations to make sure that we understand sort of what is happening. We're anxious to gain some clarity around our discretionary grants. We have had some conversations with Federal Highway Administration around our Safe Streets for All program. I know we had put that on pause. We are going to be restarting those projects back up with a little bit different scope, given the fact that the Justice 40 priorities of the original grant are no longer priorities of this administration. So you'll see some changes in terms of how those move forward. And also the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which was issued to the Mayor's Caucus, but we were a key technical partner looking at climate change impacting greenhouse gas emissions reductions around the region. A lot of that work, especially the work around the engagement activities, has also continued to be put on hold as we figure out whether or not it's acceptable for us to find other funding streams to move that forward. We will still be moving forward with some of the modeling related to the transportation sector on that as well. You know, I think, again, we have two roles. We have this federal MPO role, and we also have the state role as well as the regional planning agency. And so there are ways for us to keep the priorities of the state moving at the same time as we're being responsive to what we're hearing out of Washington, D.C. as well. So again, it's a work in progress. I want to call your attention to a couple specific things related to projects overseen by this committee. You know, unfortunately, we have heard that FHWA local or division office has lost a number of staff. They've gone from about 34 staff to 19, including John Paul Deepla, who used to sit on this committee representing federal highways. I think the impacts will become more clear as the days move on, but I think we should expect that there should be some delays or slowing down of information that we're getting from our federal partners here. Currently, there will only be about 3 staff members that will support federal investments and participate in the state and regional process here in the region. So that lack of capacity, again, I think will, we're going to do everything on our end to make sure that we're streamlining things that we're working with our federal partners with, but I think that will be a challenge moving forward. You all know that these staff at Federal Highways and FTA also continue to support and approve our products, participate in the TIP. Again, you know, I'll ask for your patience and support as we continue to sort of figure out how to be efficient. There were a couple guidance documents that came out late January that were sent to all the modal administrators of USDOT, again, providing them direction. We haven't necessarily seen too much direction ourselves in written form here. But, you know, the first memo was about the implementation of executive orders addressing energy, climate change, and diversity and gender. They detailed a process for the DOT side of the house, which said that administrators had 10 days to identify all rules, orders, directives subject that are subject to those relevant orders that were put out and put those together. There was another 10-day period where the DOT and the modal administrators were supposed to initiate actions to rescind, cancel, and revoke and terminate anything identified that wasn't expressly in the law. And then there is 30 days of a reporting period for how they're beginning to implement that. We are within that time frame right now. So again, we haven't received clear direction on how those things are moving. We've had conversations. That's one of the reasons why we know that our Safe Streets for All program does need to remove the Justice 40 focused initiatives in it. And so I'm hopeful that we'll receive clearer direction soon on some of these other things that we have in the works. But again, I'm not in control of that. The other order that was issued on the same day was called Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis in the Department of Transportation Policies, Programs, and Activities. Its stated purpose was to update and reset the principles and standards for US DOT. It includes directions that all funding initiatives be based on sound economic principles, rigorous cost benefit requirements, and data-driven decisions, things that I believe that we do in this region really well. But it also says that they wanted to prioritize projects and goals that utilize user pay models, direct funding to local opportunity zones, mitigate the impact of activities on families, specifically families with young children, and give preference to communities with marriage and birth rates higher than the national average, and prohibits the recipients of DOT support or assistance from imposing vaccine and mask mandates, and requires local compliance with federal immigration enforcement with other goals and objectives specified by the president or the secretary. Again, I don't have clarity on what that means just yet. And I know that the state of Illinois and probably many of your bosses have different opinions on how this should be implemented and how we should move forward on these things. I think, though, there are a couple things that are relevant to us here as we do our work. One, we don't have an indication of what this is going to mean for federal funding totals across the region just yet. We do have the data on families and birth rates and marriage rates, but again, there hasn't been an official source of data identified for this yet. So we don't know, what their path forward is going to be on that. And so we are going to continue to do what we do best until we have some clearer direction from the federal government on this. So one thing that has changed just yesterday that I heard about, there was also an order that included delegating the authority to US DOT's general counsel to implement activities and to review the STIPs and the TIPs and the Unified Work Program documents that fund our work here in the region. Just yesterday, we heard verbally that that is no longer going to be the case, that things do not have to go up to DC headquarters. Again, I don't have that in writing just yet, but I have heard from our state partners that they heard from Federal Highways headquarters that is no longer going to be the case. So that I think is a positive. I think we were anticipating with every state sending their STIPs and TIPs and UWP program projects to one office in DC. There might have been some backlog here. Positive is I think we'll be able to keep our projects moving forward as anticipated. So that was, I'll keep you posted as we learn more. We learn more, change my talking points. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions on federal stuff. I've got a couple things just on CMAP projects and our work program and budget. Go ahead, Amy.
Can you just describe a little about the proposed changes for the Safe Streets for All?
Yeah, so this change happened. Well, we paused this work because most of our work happens under the Unified Work Program, which is a grant agreement that we have with IDOT. And so, IDOT assured us that the work that was in last year's grant agreement was good to continue moving forward. The Safe Streets for All program was direct. We are a direct recipient from Federal Highways. So that means that we're getting reimbursed as we submit. We have been told that we can continue to move forward on completion of the plans, on doing the data-driven analysis for safety metrics across the region through the counties. So through this project, each of the counties is getting their own safety action plan. Some of it's a little bit more of a revision. Some counties are getting a full new plan. As part of that process, we had written into the grant a significant portion of funding that would be focused on equitable engagement, looking at low-income households, looking at historically disinvested communities, racial minority communities, and understanding what safety impacts might be happening in those areas and doing public engagement around that work. And so that really is the part of the planning process that is not going to move forward at this point in time. The Justice 40 tool was something that was created under the infrastructure bill, under the last administration, and has clearly been identified as something that is no longer a policy. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Stephanie, did you want to add anything? Thank you. I appreciate that. Other questions? I think one of the other parts of the conversation that we can have is that these can still be your local priorities. And so I know that Stephanie and the team will be talking to the counties specifically about what their priorities are and if they have resources that they'd like to spend on these things to complement. But we will close out the grant in sort of a way that is respectful of the new terms that we've been given. Okay. Clear as mud. We'll continue, I think, to collect information. I know that the county associations, national associations have good information. Our Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations has had really good information for us. And as we get highlights or things that might impact you, we are happy to share. And likewise, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us questions. We want to know what questions you want answers to. Go ahead.
It's kind of a procedural question, Erin. So you have a grant agreement in place to fully fund the SS4A. And like so many of us at the table have agreements in place for projects and studies. So my question is with regards to how, if there's already authorized funds for the public engagement related outreach, how is it that scope has to be removed from the project? What is the mechanism for that? Because I think that part of our cause for concern is in the uncertainty of that happening on our own projects.
Yeah. Well, part of the one of the executive orders or directives to USDOT staff is that as part of their process of like identifying things that are not in alignment and then going in and renegotiating the grant agreements or providing new terms to the grant recipients. And so I am anticipating that that will be the process by which they, that they're going to come back and amend the grant.
The agreement will be amended to cut that out is like mechanically how this will be effectuated, that change.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. You're welcome. Let's see, this month, actually, it's not March. I'm getting ahead of myself. This month, the board approved our annual budget and work plan for fiscal year 2026, starting July 1st, 2025. We're excited about the next year's worth of work. We've got a couple of things that we'll be hyper-focused on here internally to help drive better decision-making, really focusing on our data coordination and leadership here with our team. So you'll see that outlined in the budget. We have also recently hosted the second meeting for our new regional ADA coordinators group. We had more than 45 attendees from municipal and local governments across the region come to get together, learn from one another and our staff, and share some of the challenges that they're facing in the real world. That's helping us sort of better prepare what types of tools and activities we might need to develop. Amy Lee also joined her peers from CTA in Kane County, where they talked about funding and transportation funding at WTS Chicago Chapter's January meeting. I know that that was a well-attended event. Our staff has also participated in the Chicago Architecture Center's annual Engineering Fest, where students from across the region got together to reimagine and design the worlds that they want. And so our team was hands-on working with youth. It was an inspiring experience. So I would highly recommend that in the future, if you have the opportunity, if you haven't gone to some of these youth-focused engineering events, they are just such a inspiration. Our team has also been participating in the Consortium Scenario Planning Conference that recently was held in Florida. Again, as we think about sort of the future, as we think about our vision plan, as we think about the long-range transportation plan that we're working on, understanding alternative futures is sort of core to our mission here, and we want to bring that value back to you all. And then also the My Daily Travel Household Survey does continue until about May. The last batch of invites are being sent right now. We've had about triple the number of survey responses we expected. So that's really good, but we want to keep momentum so that we hit our ultimate goal, I think, of about 4,000 households participating. It's a highly detailed survey. If you've ever had to do it, we want to know how you are moving every point of your day so that we can use that to better calibrate our travel model and tools. And we know so much has changed. So this is a really important survey for us right now. And then I'm happy to share that for the third year in a row, we've worked with you all. Thank you to yourself or your staffs for supporting our work on the Northeastern Illinois Priority Investments booklet. Again, it's available for you all if you're in DC to talk about the priorities of this region, the important critical infrastructure projects that you all have. And so, again, we're hopeful that we can continue to use this to make the case that Chicago is a place that is worthy of investment because our people, the freight, our goods movement here help drive the nation's economy here. So with that, I'll just share one last fact that they put here. The region secured more than $1.27 billion in federal funding for transportation projects in 2024. That's a big number. And so I think a lot of that is due to the hard work of you and your teams. But sometimes when I have numbers, they're pretty impactful. That's a great result for our region. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. And I appreciate closing that out on a very positive note. That's good. No, but we appreciate the guidance, and speaking for a lot of implementing agencies up here, relying on you, our state, our federal partners to kind of navigate this. There's a lot of questions, and we know there's a lot of lawsuits going on. So appreciate just the ongoing feedback and discussions on all these types of things, keeping us on the right track. So, I lost my train of thought. There we go. Item 5. So Russell will be here today. He's standing at the podium right now to provide an overview on the fiscal year 2023 through 2028 TIP amendments. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning. Just as a little bit of a recap, when I go to give some of the stuff here, the first two digits, 25, refer to the year that we're in. So it's going to be TIP Amendment 25-05, as it says on the screen there. 05 means it's the fifth time that we're doing an amendment. So just for those who are new, that's what those numbers signify. So included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 122 TIP changes contained in formal TIP Amendment 25-05 and the 232 TIP changes contained in Administrative Amendments 25-05.1 and 25-05.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of $1,401,900,000 in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. Here are a few highlights. IDOT added about $47 million for work on the Bishop Ford, including resurfacing and bridge work. The CTA added a few new projects, including $71 million to do track and station work at or near the Fullerton and Diversity stations, and about $60 million for bus turnarounds and ADA improvements, primarily at the Halsted and 79th Street area. Pace added $31.5 million to continue their work on expanding the Southwest Garage facility. Administrative amendments reduced the total cost in the TIP by $216.1 million in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for the total cost in the TIP from all amendments resulted in $1,185.8 million being added to the TIP in prior, current, and future years. As shown in the memo, cost changes comprised most of the formal changes, while administrative amendments were primarily AC and ACC changes and schedule changes. Accounting for the amendments presented to you today, the tip remains physically constrained. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on February 21st for committee and public review. Approval of formal tip amendment 25-05 is requested, and after the motion has been made, I can answer any questions if there are any.
All right. Thank you, Russell, for that. Yeah, let's start by getting a motion to get this on the floor. So I'll entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 25-05. Jack, do I have a second? Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. All right. Any questions or comments, discussions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, MPC has a comment on the Kendall County Metro Extension Project. This is a roughly $6 million project that has almost $1 million in Rebuild Illinois money layered over a congressional earmark. The proposed extension runs for 20 miles west of Aurora through a county with a population density of under 500 people per square mile. There's no current bus service in the corridor, and there's no fixed route transit service in the area. Benish and WSP did a comprehensive planning study on this project that wrapped up in 2021. It estimated that it would cost $700 million to build the extension and $14 million a year to operate. Using CMAP's population projections, the study projected that the 20-mile line would generate just 2,000 net riders a day. So by way of comparison, the number 73 Armitage bus that runs by my house is considered a low performer by CTA standards. It carries 4,000 people a day. So we're probably talking about an investment in today's dollars of $1 billion to carry half of what a low-performing PACE or CTA bus route would carry. The rail extension lies outside of RTA's jurisdiction. It's not on CMAP's list of regionally significant projects. It's not in RTA's strategic plan or capital program. There's no agreement on whether or how Kendall County will join the RTA or otherwise help pay to build the extension and fund its operations. Metra has about $12 billion in unmet capital needs over the next decade. It recently announced that its capital shortfall required it to go to the federal government and borrow $250 million to fund critical bridge repairs. Advancing this project would put the Kendall Rail Extension Project in a position to directly compete with Metra and other transit providers in the region for scarce capital dollars. If this proposed project work is just a do-over of the Benish WSP plan, the question is, what are the glaring deficiencies of that plan that requires $6 million to fix? Or if this project is designed to advance this project on the conveyor belt, then the question is, why would this transportation committee sign off on further development of a project that contributes few riders, has high cost, and gives more competition that all of us face for funding to advance the needs and support the needs of our existing system? So CMAP's tip document at page 36 says, and I quote, CMAP staff does not have the authority to deny implementation of any project that meets the eligibility criteria of the fund sources being used for that project. I read two things from that. The first thing is we can't assume that staff is endorsing the projects that go into the proposed tip amendments. It's left to the Transportation Committee to do that scrutiny and make that analysis. But second, is there a question whether this project is even eligible? It's denominated as a Metra extension project, but IDOT, not Metra, is the project lead. So I question, or MPC questions whether this project is eligible for funding on a Metra project where Metra is nowhere to be found, whether that meets the eligibility criteria for funding. So to conclude, this is not the time for the region to advance this project. The needs of our existing system must be our priority at this time. The Kendall Extension Project is simply not compelling enough. 2,000 daily riders with a $1 billion investment and a 15 to 20 million probably annual operating expense. That's not a compelling enough case to put it in competition with Metra, CTA, and the other needs of the region. While it's surely tempting to treat this earmarked money as found money, let's just spend it, do another plan. It's easy. It's important to recall that this region is asking the public for an additional $1.5 billion each year to improve regional transit operations on the existing system. Spending money on a project that is weak on the merits and lacks a local funding and regional participation plan sends a terrible message to the public about how well their extra $1.5 billion would be spent. That's a really bad message to spend during the crucial spring legislative session. So, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'm not sure of the mechanics. I'd like to make a motion to exclude this Metra extension project from the proposed TIP amendment. And with that exclusion, MPC would be happy to support the remaining TIP amendment.
Want to start by
So let's go over a
having
couple things.
discussion? Yeah, let's talk. about it a little bit.
Tip procedure wise, this is not a consent agenda that items can be pulled from. So it's what you're actually being asked to do is to approve if we've followed our process. If we have a process that says certain types of amendments are formal amendments, and formal amendments go to the Transportation Committee, they go through a public comment period, and other types of amendments are administrative. And what you're actually approving is that we have followed our process. This project specifically is adding federal funds to the TIP. Adding federal funds to the TIP in a TIP year is a formal amendment. We are following our process as established. The other thing is that we have worked with Kendall County specifically on this. The project itself does not have additional phases beyond the alternatives analysis that this earmark is for. It is not technically an RSP or RCP as the name will evolve. It cannot get NEPA approval because it doesn't have a subsequent phase programmed in the TIP, same as all projects. It is not conformed because it doesn't have a subsequent phase. So it can't go and do any of the other issues or any of the other, in terms of the comment about being on the conveyor belt, it's not through this action on the conveyor belt to proceed forward. It's only enabling it to do one specific thing, which is what is in the earmark that was obtained from Lauren Underwood's office. So from a TIP procedure standpoint, this entry has followed our established procedures, and all of the projects that were presented in the formal amendment have also followed the established procedures that have been presented to you. I believe, I don't know, Kendall County might be on here. It's up to the chair if they want to recognize them to speak on behalf of the project.
Yeah, Doug, I guess that sounds good to me. If let them come on. I mean, I don't know a ton about the project. If there's someone from Kendall County, I think you mentioned Christina Burns, their administrator, or maybe Matt Asselmeyer, one of their planners. If they want to come and provide a little background or provide their perspective, that'd be.
Hi, this is Christina Burns, the County Administrator for Kendall County. I just want to confirm that you can hear me and see me. I've had some internet issues.
Yeah, we can hear you, Christina. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this project that is important to Kendall County. And I appreciate the questions and concerns. However, this is an important project, we believe, for the region. We have done a number of previous studies, and these funds would advance those studies. One of the important parts of it is to do an alternatives analysis. which we believe may indicate a much more cost-effective solution to bringing transit to Kendall County. Kendall County continues to be the fastest growing county in Illinois. We are at 135,000 people right now. We are growing by leaps and bounds. I would invite any of you to come see the number of subdivisions that have gone up just in the last few years. So we believe that there is a growing base of potential future Metro riders that are coming to Kendall County. Their current point, those who do commute to the city are boarding at the Aurora and Naperville stops, which are already the most congested on the line. So we believe that continuing to pursue this path to understand what will be the costs, what a transportation system will look like, it's important to just keep moving forward. We do understand that it may be required that Kendall County joins RTA, and we are happy to consider that when we have more answers to these questions. We simply don't have the answers to have that conversation with the public at this time. We don't know how much it will cost. We don't know what fares will look like. We don't know what our service levels will be. So asking the county to join the RTA at this juncture is premature. But we do understand that it may certainly be part of the conversation moving forward. So Kendall County simply, is simply asking to continue to explore bringing transportation to a part of the Chicago region that is growing and will be a future user base for transit into the city and into other areas of the Chicago region.
All right, thank you, Christina. Appreciate the background on that and your perspective.
And if I can add one more thing, just to address the comment that it states that it's a Metro extension, that's just the project title. That doesn't, we have project titles that are just there for descriptive purposes. If this project were to at some point, be built, that's what it would be. So that's why the project title is called that. There are other projects in the tip that have other titles for which the sponsor itself is not the title that we see. So it's just a descriptor. So I just want to be clear that that doesn't mean Metro is responsible for doing this project or even has to be involved. It's just a descriptor so that the public understands what it actually is that the work is that they're entailing. So thank you.
Thank you. Is this, I'm red, green, colorblind. It's just being tough. Is this, can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Appreciate those comments. And I just want to stress that I had two grandparents who were able to get their high school education because an interurban ran through their rural area. So I feel strongly the importance of what Kendall County may be feeling. On the other hand, as Aaron pointed out, we're in challenging times. And I think the effort that Russell described going forward, the planning work and whatnot, really gets in the way of what the hard choices we have to make, which is we have serious needs in our current system. We have a challenging federal environment, and we should be zealous about concentrating our efforts in addressing those needs before we move forward. I'm also concerned, I hear it's not denominated in the TIP amendment, that this is an alternatives analysis. It's not denominated as that. It's denominated as a Metro extension study. So I would be very uncomfortable supporting this project as it's presented to us simply on a verbal assurance that it's actually going to consider alternatives. What's the range of alternatives? Does alternatives mean different rolling stock? Does it mean express buses? Does it mean other forms of ways of getting people around? So MPC will stand on its concern and again would ask to move forward with our proposed amendment, which would exclude this one from the TIP this time. It can come back, perhaps repackaged for committee consideration, but today we need to focus on existing needs, and that would be the nature of my request.
Yeah, I think we have a couple more questions here. I know Tara has a question, but one clarification, because I think you mentioned, Russell, that we're voting on the process. It's a kind of a yes or no. but I guess checking in with CMAP staff, is it possible
Yeah,
to?
what you're doing is saying, did CMAP follow the process? Is the tip physically constrained? That's what you're being technically asked to do when you approve a tip amendment.
I guess what I'm hearing maybe from Thomas is that Thomas is looking to propose an amendment to pull that project out of.
We
this tip
don't have a
amendment.
way
Are we
to
allowed
do that
or-
because physical constraint is for all the projects that were in this group. The tip is physically constrained with all of this. We would have to redo our analysis. That may seem, like easy peasy to do, but it's not something we've done. So then all the amendment itself, we would have to redo that and present it differently to the public because it went through a public comment period and things of that nature. So I don't know, we've never done that before, so I can't say that we have an established process for doing that. But I just want to reiterate, what you're being asked to approve is did CMAP follow the process? And the projects that are on the formal amendment are the ones that are supposed to be on the formal amendment because that's the process, and that it went through a public comment period, and that the tip is physically constrained. Now, we do have federal partners here that can weigh in. They do approve the tip too. I don't know if FTA wants to weigh in.
Hi, Mark Kane, FTA. So, the majority of this funding is derived from an earmark passed by Congress, and we do a screening of eligibilities before the legislation goes to the floor and is passed. So it is eligible in our eyes, and the legislative language passed on the federal side is just to conduct a NEPA analysis and early planning work. So that is the extent for what a grant would be awarded for, and nothing more than that. So the recipient in this instance would be IDOT, because Kendall County is not a recipient of federal transit assistance. So that's why IDOT is the project sponsor in a TRAMS grant for FTA. So when we do grant awards, they have to stay in the confined definition of what was passed by law in the earmark, which is conducting a NEPA analysis and early planning work. In this particular instance, we don't have enough information available to us to assign a NEPA class of action. So this earmark will be used to do early planning work that will in turn develop a NEPA class of action request where we would act on NEPA at a later date. So that's the parameters of the earmark. How the earmark is matched on the local side is up on the local side, but these are earmarked dollars passed by Congress and at some point need to be awarded.
And if I could just ask for clarification, I don't hear alternatives analysis in your, in a sense of alternative mode analysis, for example. The approved earmark would be to, again, in my bad analogy, move a metro rail extension project further along the conveyor belt to set it up for NEPA analysis?
No, so this is like an alternatives analysis is not required by FTA anymore. It can be done, but this is just an early planning phase of the project. It's unclear to us whether Metro would be the provider of this service or if there's another provider that would do this service. This is what this earmark would find out. So like, it's eligible to conduct early planning work because this is an earmark. It's not a part of the formula. So like, we screen for eligibility and that's the extent of it. It was deemed eligible by our chief counsel's office and policy office when the legislation was about to be passed.
Tara Orban from Cook County, just quick point of clarification. So that process that you described is how it got entered into the tip, right? The earmark,
Well,
the sponsor.
yeah, so like
To use
earmarks
the
are-
funding, it has to get added into the
in
tip.
order for a federal award to be awarded by highway or transit, it has to be in the tip step. So the earmark is outside of the formula program, but it still has to be incorporated into the tip stip for an award. So that's what this action is for. It's for including the earmark into the tip for an award at a future date.
And Russell, the slide that we're looking at here says it was published for review and public comment on February 21st. Is that comment period still open?
That's a good question. I don't,
Today's the 28th. I don't know how long it's.
I think it would have closed at, I'm looking at my colleagues last
Closes
night, like
with
at
this
midnight
meeting.
or something like
Okay.
that. It's 7 days.
Comma mentioned it closes with this meeting. So
Okay.
does anyone know if we've received if CMAP has received any comments thus far?
MPC did send us basically the same, similar comments to what they have articulated here. So MPC was the only comments that I'm aware of that we received, not just on this project, but on all the projects.
So what I'm hearing from this conversation, my takeaway is from everyone's input is that well-noted concerns on the project, but there's no means to carry, it's even a misnomer to call it a project sometimes. We call it a capital project, or bulldozers are coming next month to build something. This is a study, and that was eligible for the use of federal funds authorized by Congress into the TIP. And it's incumbent upon all of us to, when a study moves forward, to actively participate in that process as well, because that is how we will influence the outcomes of these studies. I can say for an implementing agency, we would love to have more participants in the studies that we do. So perhaps that's another way, Thomas, to look at this is if it were to move forward as a study in Kendall County, that we have ample opportunity to participate in the outcome.
Appreciate those comments. But there is Russell's concern, I think, would be heightened if we were here asking this committee to add a project to the bundle after it's gone through the public hearing. But subtracting a project should have less concern. And I'm pretty confident that this committee has the authority to say, we're not advancing one of the proposed TIP projects. And then on the merits, there's just the question is, does it make sense for this region to be pursuing a low ridership, high cost project outside of the RTA service area when we have, what, Kyle, 35 billion in unmet capital needs with the transit agencies? Now's the time to say and send a message to the public. We're focused on our core, we're focused on improving service, and we're not at this time going to advance studying a 20-mile extension to our system.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I guess I'm curious, and apologize, I don't know how are the so a public comment was submitted. I don't know if any others were on anything else or this project, but like, how is that reviewed and treated? Because I'm just wondering if there were multiple public comments on a project or whatever, how does that get treated and how does this committee interpret it? And what is the proper place for objections to be raised, I guess, for it to be then?
This is Amy Lee, CMAP. I'll just speak a little bit to here what the value of the TIP amendment process is. It's really designed to put on our collective radar what are individual agencies in the region planning to do or in the process of doing, right? It's basically to create this discussion that we're having right now so that you have an early indication of where projects might be headed or what new projects are being conceived. It's a different mechanism, though, to talk about the merits of a particular project, and that would be through the RTP process, right? So individual project evaluation would come through the RTP process, not through the TIP process, if that makes any sense.
Amy, that's helpful clarification, and I think MPC would be amenable to a motion to defer action on this TIP amendment until that RTP process can be done, and there can be an assessment by staff and this committee as to the merits of this proposed extension project. But we continue to have deep concerns about advancing a project of limited merits in a time of fiscal constraint and real policy challenges from Washington and elsewhere.
So I'll just add, right, so the action that you would be taking today is just to confirm that the addition of this planning study does not impact the region from a fiscal constraint perspective, as well as air quality conformity perspective. So if the dollars are already earmarked for this, that should check a box for you. And if doing this study doesn't impact air quality, that should also check a box for you.
And just to add one more thing to that, you're also saying that CMAP as an agency as our staff follow the established procedures to do TIP amendments.
All right. Yes, PS.
Yes, Sriraj, University of Illinois, Chicago. I think the points raised by MPC are valid to some extent, but it's also the optics of it. And then the concern seems to be how the project is titled, as opposed to the merits of whether the funding should go there. Because we are talking about Kendall being part of the region, but not being part of the RTA service area. And so that presents a dichotomy. So I'm just wondering if it is possible within the framework that CMAP uses to rename that to something more generic in terms of mobility options, exploration of mobility options in Kendall County, as opposed to leading off with Metro extension to Kendall. That seems to suggest something different.
I would offer that this offers a lot of transparency to the process too, right? And so I would just sort of counter argue that point.
So just to be clear on those things, MPC would be happy to get this project out of the TIP at this point without prejudice to it coming back as part of the RTP regionally significant process. So there can be a true and full assessment of its merits, but it's not prepared to advance a project into the TIP and all of the consequences associated with that, as this is denominated as a metro extension project, and what we know from a previous and relatively recent study about its ridership and its cost.
Yeah, and I think we have some other questions here, and I just want to respond to that too, Thomas. And I, again, appreciate the comments and definitely have validity, and I understand where you're coming from. As someone who doesn't have a horse in a race, but we go through the phase 1 process and stuff all the time. I mean, I do have a lot of trust in that process, right? And I think, from my understanding, is this project is just at the front end of that. So it has the earmark funding, it's going through the process. It still has to go through alternatives and including the no-build alternative. And it doesn't have any funding. We're not giving any funding for future phases. I mean, it would have to come back. It would have to go through the RSP or the RCP process in the future. And then it would have to also apply for funding and go through all the scoring and ranking metrics. So, you know what I mean? So it's not like this project's coming in and we're just saying, hey, this is going to happen, right? I think it's at the very infancy. And it doesn't mean that that project is going to continue on to be one of our projects in the future. It's going to have to, compete for funding just like any other project does. So just, my thoughts on that. Not certainly, I hear your concerns and valid and all that kind of stuff, but just kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out, Megan Swanson, IDOT, that since this is earmarked funding, we can't switch it to something else if it's not spent on this. It can only be used for this dedicated purpose at the direction of the legislator who earmarked it. So the thought of if we don't spend it here, couldn't it go to something else? Maybe it can't.
Yes, Jennifer.
Thanks, Amy. Your comments about we're approving that it's not impacting fiscal constraint and air quality rather than the merits of the project were super helpful for me understanding what we're really talking about procedurally. I guess I still don't feel like I understand the role of the public comment process though, and how that gets worked in, right? Because that is part of the process that we're saying you did. So if the comments were more about fiscal constraint and air quality, and there was something like, has there been a case where there was public comment that then got sort of processed and summarized for this committee or something?
Yeah, I can address that. So as the person who presents the tip amendments on a regular basis, we do on occasion get a comment. We did in this case. Depending on what the comment is, we will sometimes meet with them ahead of the meeting and try to address their concerns or talk about whatever it is that they have brought. Sometimes the comments are not relevant to what, it's just an opportunity for somebody to comment. We've opened up a public comment period on the tip, but they're commenting on other stuff. And we want to clarify that. We've had that happen with conformity amendments multiple times where folks have commented on stuff that was not on the amendment. In this case, we received one public comment from MPC. We received no other public comments about anything. And I think that they have articulated what their concerns are. We did discuss that with them. And so that's kind of the process. We will either bring it to this, we always actually, I shouldn't say, we always bring the public comments when we have them from the public, not committee members, but non-committee members. I have done that before and I have read them as part of the record here so that everybody is aware of what the public comments are. And we've often read what our response was to that if we've already responded. So we do take public comment serious. We do respond to it. It doesn't always mean we can change stuff, but we hear people and we acknowledge that they have a concern about something and we don't brush it off. We do try to do our best to respond and be responsible to public comment. In all honesty, we almost never get public comment. So it's not common that we actually do get a public comment. I think this is the first public comment we've gotten in 2025.
All right, I guess procedurally here, Thomas, it sounds like you're looking to make an amendment to what's proposed to us today. If you can kind of voice that officially, and then I think we can try to get a motion in a second. And
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Our proposal is as follows: to advance the item 5.01 for approval with the exclusion of tip ID number 09-25-0019, which is the Kendall County Metro Extension Project, without prejudice to Kendall County, IDOT, Metra, RTA, or any other public agency later making the case to CMAP for possible advancement of the project. But that is the motion is, again, to approve this amendment with the exclusion of the Kendall County Metro Extension Project.
Okay. Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Are we able to amend something while we've already have a motion and second on the approving it?
yes, I believe so, yes.
So the motion in the second, I believe, and I'm going to wait for someone from CMAP to raise their hand. That's just for a topic to be discussed.
Okay.
So it just opens it for discussion. So I think the point of what we're trying to do now is, having heard collectively a variety of concerns, we want to formally hear what the motion is proposed by MPC, and hear if there is a second to continue the discussion and move forward. Is that right? Right, the second. We don't have a second right now. There has to be a second to even vote it on.
Oh, okay. To vote on it as an amendment and then, okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry if I'm not following procedure. Instead of putting all the service boards on the spot, Kyle, can I just ask a clarifying question? Are the service boards or RTA impacted by this project in the tip? There was a discussion about uses of funds impacting other transit agencies in the state. Is there a direct impact of this project on our transit partners in Chicago?
The short answer, I believe, is no. I welcome comments from Lynette, but I mean, we have been asked about this project in any number of ways for many years, and we've had discussions with Kendall County and with the Congresswoman, and been clear that, you know, the project is not in our capital plan. Our capital plan only includes projects in the 6-county RTA region. And if this project were to move forward, it would need to move forward right as it stands right now with funding that's not RTA capital or operating funding. And as the county administrator referenced, you know, there have been discussions about Kendall County's interest in joining the RTA, and, you know, we have provided information for those discussions, but that decision has not been made, and that's a decision for Kendall County to make.
Okay, so
So as of a lot of those other decisions and processes would have to move forward to the point where it would even potentially impact.
Okay, but there's no
RTA.
direct impact now. Anything that evolves from this, there could be, but that's unforeseen now, right?
Yes, and Lynette, please tell me if you.
I'll jump in from Metro. So clearly this is a Kendall County project. It has our name in it, but it is Kendall County's project. IDOT is the sponsor, not us. We view this as outside of the region because it is outside of our 6-county region that we have the jurisdiction to operate. So therefore, we would view this as any other project that would come to us to come into our territory, be it Amtrak, be it one of the other IDOT services from anywhere else within the state, be it Indiana, Wisconsin, whoever would come into our service territory. We would have the conversations with them to make sure that we are made whole as they come into our service territory, to make sure our service operates, make sure that they provide additional infrastructure so as not to degrade any of our service. These are all the things that we would do with any partner that would come to us who is outside of the region. I also want to just throw on the table that the region has a long-range transportation plan called Onto 2050. Metro extensions are in the unconstrained version of the 2050 plan. This extension is called out in that plan. So it is in the approved 2050 plan, which my understanding allows the implementers, whoever the sponsors, to be able to do planning studies for those. Now, they can't get construction money. You need to be in the constrained version of the plan in order to get construction funding. But the whole point of being in the unconstrained plan, at least from my understanding, is that it allows implementers to be able to do that planning work so that there is enough information to eventually move it into a constrained plan, which is all subject to the RTP, which is all subject to the evaluation of the long-range plan. So.
And I can confirm what Metro said is exactly correct. It is, I mean, there have been multiple chances that Kendall County has submitted it for an RSP, and more work needed to be done. It was not included, but it was encouraged to go do more planning work at that time.
All right, so just for some clarity here, we're gonna have an amendment, a proposed amendment here to approve TIP Amendment 25-05, but specifically excluding TIP ID 09-25-0019, which is referred to as the Kendall County Metro Extension. So that's kind of the amendment that we have proposed to us today. So do I have a motion on that?
I think I
Or
just made
you
it.
had the motion, gotcha.
Then we need a
Motion
second,
was there.
if there
Do
is
we have
a
a second on that amendment?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I understood that we were voting on whether or not to amend the first motion that I and someone over there made. I apologize. I don't remember who. Is that not the case?
No, I think, so we have the amendment, we would vote, we had the motion in a second, we have to get a second on the amendment, and then we
Yeah.
would vote on that amendment.
Okay.
And then I think that, then we go back to, if there's a second, then we would vote on that, then we go back to the original vote.
Then we go back to the original
to
motion.
approve the amended, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Correct, yeah, if we don't have if there's no second on this amendment, then we go back to the original and there's no vote on this amendment, so. So do I have a second on the amended? All right. Seeing none, we don't have a second on that one, so then we would go back to the original approval of tip amendment 25-05 as proposed, and it is in the agenda today, which we have a motion and a second on. So I will take that one. I'll say all in favor.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Awesome. Motion carries. All right. Let me know if I procedurally, if we need to do any cleanup on that one, but we're good? Okay. I think we got it. Moving on to item 6 is the Regional Transportation Plan update. And thank you, Russell. Appreciate the time. Item 6.01 is the Regional Transportation Plan update. And with us today is Ryan Tumto and Julie Reschke. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. Sure everybody can hear me here. Yeah, good morning. Again, my name is Ryan Tomto, Principal Policy Analyst. I use he, him pronouns. So the bulk of today's presentation is actually being given by my colleague, Julie Reschke, who's the project manager of the Regional Transportation Plan work. But I want to just give a brief kind of overall update of where we're at, and she'll be focusing in more on the emerging priorities report that was included in the agenda packet today. So if we go to the next slide, and then the one after this, yeah, there we go. As many of you can recall from previous discussions, the emerging priorities work has been progressing in parallel with the existing conditions work. This effort is our initial step in understanding what's top of mind for our regional transportation partners and stakeholders. It involved a review of more than 30 plans from state, regional, county, and local agencies, as well as a scan of regional planning activities underway at CMAP. Additionally, this was informed by numerous one-on-one conversations with most, if not all of you at this table today. And so this emerging priorities work really establishes those initial goals and objectives that we'll be using to lead into the next phases of work as we start working to understand performance and those existing conditions to lead us into our conversations around strategies. So beyond those existing conditions and emerging priorities work, we've had a lot else going on. As many of you know who are on the Regional Capital Projects Resource Group, that resource group met earlier this month and focused on evaluation criteria. That conversation will continue to the next meeting, and then we'll also be digging into, as was discussed here earlier, the administrative procedures around how we amend the future 2026 Regional Transportation Plan. Also want to note that we have begun the process of collecting project information for regional capital projects, and we developed a new tool using a GIS-based project submission tool that we're hoping is going to help kind of provide some more efficiency to the process, both in terms of making sure we get all the information we need, as well as kind of a quality control element of this. I know in the past, that process has required a lot of back and forth, so we're hoping to streamline it. Yeah. But we also know that it's a new tool, and we've already identified some things that we'd like to improve upon it. So we're really looking forward to hearing feedback from our implementing partners on how that tool is working. And we have already reached out to some of our largest implementers who have a lot of projects that will be submitted to find additional ways that we can help streamline that process, particularly around things like state of good repair projects. So then for financial plan development, work continues to develop the baseline revenue forecast. That resource group also met recently to discuss some of the assumptions of that forecast work, as well as to start talking about some of the kind of the universe of reasonably expected revenues that we'll be looking at to include in the plan. It's not included here on this timeline, but the congestion management strategy line of stream of work also continues, and that resource group met. And really that work is starting to shift into the development around strategies for congestion management. And those strategies, it's important to note, will funnel right into the RTP. So that's kind of an early phase of work that then will be brought into this space to talk about for inclusion in the RTP. The last thing I really wanted to note is that stakeholder engagement and public outreach portion of work. over the past year, this has largely been focused on a lot of one-on-one conversations and then presentations like to committees and boards like this one. But as we pivot into 2025, this is really ramping up and we're really starting to lean into that public outreach component of it. So I just wanted to note that the RTP does have an engagement site online. That site includes an RTP informational video, which we were going to play today, but we're going to skip it for time's sake. But it also includes a questionnaire that we've released. This was just released for the last couple weeks. We've already received 300 responses, so we're really excited about how much engagement we've been getting in that space. Important to note that that questionnaire is available in both English and Spanish. And if you haven't already, you'll be receiving an email with more information to help you all share it through your networks. We have developed a toolkit to help our partners share it in their newsletters or social media, things like that. Additionally, on that engagement site, you can access all the presentations and meeting notes and other materials from the various resource groups. And there's also an FAQ there, as well as we've been calling it a memo submission portal, but I think we're going to rename it. But it's basically a space that beyond the questionnaire, if your organization or you as an individual have a memo or ideas or a document or something you would like us to consider as part of the development of this process, it's a place where you can upload that and we can have it as an official way of tracking that information. As well, though, everybody at this table at any time should feel comfortable emailing myself with things or Julie Reschke, the project manager. And so with that, that's my overall general update, but I'm going to hand it over to Julie, who will walk us through the emerging priorities report.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Julie Reschke. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior policy analyst here at CMAP. In your agenda for this meeting, you received the 2026 RTP's Emerging Priority Report. And today we'll walk through that information at a high level, leaving time at the end to discuss any thoughts, questions, or feedback you may have. So as Ryan just outlined, 2025 will be a busy year for the RTP. The first half of this year is dedicated to building consensus around our regional vision for transportation and assessing the current state of play in some key goal areas. After this summer, we'll take all the information we've gained and use it to inform strategic discussions about how we as a region will implement our goals for transportation. The Emerging Priority Report marks a milestone deliverable for the RTP, outlining high-level goals and objectives that reflect early research and feedback from stakeholders like yourselves. Next slide, please. So before we get into the proposed RTP goals, I'd like to share some brief details about the Emerging Priorities Report. The document serves as a snapshot in time to summarize key themes and priorities highlighted in early stages of research and engagement. The report builds off current and ongoing regional planning efforts like On to 2050 and reflects input from stakeholders like transportation agencies, county partners, advocacy organizations, and CMAP board and committees. As such, much of the content in the report is likely already familiar to you as it represents longstanding transportation priorities and topics we've been discussing for quite some time. And while the report is a milestone deliverable that helps us make progress defining key goal areas in the RTP, please note that the final plan is where we'll work together as a region to solidify these details. So today we'll be presenting a summary of what we've heard so far and to hear from you about anything that's on your mind, questions, feedback, or other considerations. Next slide, please. So the Emerging Priorities Report identifies 5 goal areas, which you can see on the screen. These goals are to strengthen connections between people and places, prioritize safety and public health, mitigate pollution and invest in resilient infrastructure, support economic prosperity and inclusive growth, and strategically govern, fund, and preserve the system. For the remainder of this presentation, I'll walk through these goals one by one, and then we'll wrap up with some feedback and discussion. So this first goal is about improving how people experience the transportation system. Objectives here highlight the need for strategies to improve travel time reliability, intelligent transportation system or ITS technologies, multimodal access options and flexibility across all modes, and transportation facilities and infrastructure that are fully ADA compliant. And while there's a focus on travel within the region, this goal area can also support the need for better connections into and out of the region through intercity bus and rail. The region has already provided an abundance of plans and studies to support these objectives, including the RTA's Transit is the Answer, CMAP's Mobility Recovery, and county transportation plans focused on the bike and pedestrian network. Additionally, the congestion management strategy that Ryan just mentioned is underway and is working to help inform this goal area as well. Safety continues to be a significant regional priority. Data and residents' lived experiences have emphasized the need to better manage speed on our roadways. Additionally, local and countywide initiatives have supported a more comprehensive approach to planning our transportation corridors to prevent crashes. By providing safe and abundant opportunities to use active transportation, these priorities can also support public health. However, we've heard from stakeholders like you that some of your communities experience disproportionate burdens from transportation, potentially through factors like air pollution, noise levels, or safety risks. We heard interest in using the RTP planning process to further explore these challenges and identify strategies to improve disparate outcomes in public health. For the next goal here, the region's natural resources are a critical asset that support essential ecosystems, support public health, and makes Northeastern Illinois an attractive travel destination. ONDA 2050 sets transportation-specific strategies to protect these resources and to reduce harmful pollution caused by the transportation sector, especially through emissions. Since the adoption of ONDA 2050 in 2018, stakeholders across the region have committed to these goals and made investments to advance them. Current and ongoing climate plans continue to highlight the need to reduce pollution from transportation and to make our transportation assets more resilient to extreme conditions like storms, flooding, or intense heat and cold. Moving forward, stakeholders have indicated that they're looking to the RTP to provide alignment across these efforts and to continue advancing shared goals. For the fourth goal here, a message we heard, especially from our county partners this fall, is that transportation strategies should not be a one-size-fits-all. Our communities have unique economic and land use needs that are shaped by local market conditions, nearby industry, and transportation infrastructure. There's interest in using the RTP to explore approaches that align transportation planning with local development priorities, ensuring that investments support economic growth, job creation, and industry-specific transportation needs. In particular, our freight network has a significant impact on our regional economy. Stakeholders feel positively about the progress the CREATE program has made and would like to continue making improvements that enhance the efficiency of freight operations. At the same time, however, we've heard about challenges to balance freight activity with impacts to nearby communities. Government partners are interested in using the RTP to explore strategies to balance freight efficiency with community well-being. And finally, for the last goal area here, our region has a legacy transportation system with many historic assets requiring significant investment to maintain and modernize. Both research and stakeholder feedback highlighted system preservation as one of the highest priorities for our regional transportation system, with significant needs to increase funding sources, facilitate collaboration, and improve data collection and sharing. And outside of maintaining our current infrastructure, government partners also want to advance new and innovative projects. Some of these project ideas include emerging technologies, which may pose new or unique considerations for the region. To manage these needs and implement the region's vision for transportation, we need sustainable and sufficient funding. Through the RTP's financial plan, we can build off efforts like the Plan of Action for Regional Transit to explore options to improve and expand revenue sources. So to wrap up here, ultimately, the Emerging Priorities Report helps set the foundation for upcoming work in the RTP. By outlining goals and objectives at a high level in this early phase, we can promote greater alignment with subsequent efforts like data analysis, policy development, and the ultimate identification of performance measures. And later this fall, we'll use this information to discuss actions and strategies that help advance the region's vision for transportation. And now, we'd like to turn it over to you all with the time that we have left to, hear if you have any feedback on the proposed goals or objectives, or if you have any other considerations on your mind as we think about planning into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Ryan. Any questions or comments? Oh, Kyle, go ahead.
One area that I think we should think about featuring prominently in the RTP in the context of these priorities is growing the portion of trips taken by transit, walking, and biking. I know that expanding multimodal access is one of the potential objectives for the strengthening connections goal, but it seems like we could lift that up a little bit more, particularly because it's closely linked to all the goals: public health, inclusive growth, climate. Progress in all of these areas requires reducing driving and getting more people riding transit, walking, and biking. And I think sometimes we're reluctant to be explicit about that because it suggests that, we as a region are saying people shouldn't drive or can't drive. And I think we could be clear, like there are parts of the region and there are certain trips where driving will remain the best option, but there's also lots of parts of the region and lots of trips where transit and walking and biking could be options already. Our options could be better options if we make the investments and pursue the strategies that are necessary. So given the benefits to public health and to equity and to climate, it just seems like we should elevate that goal. And it's not just about access, it's about mode shift and getting more people to use those modes.
Right. Thank you, Kyle. Yep, Jennifer.
Yeah, a comment and then one question. We were skimming it yesterday, didn't fully digest it yet, but it seemed like there was some more specificity in some of the strategies around, for instance, like safety for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, which is great. But sort of similar to Kyle's, right? Like there wasn't as much specificity about the transit infrastructure needed to really boost that. And I don't know if it needs to be framed around sort of high capacity mode infrastructure or something like that. But that was a sort of omission that we noticed. And my question is actually, and I'm sure it's clear somewhere, but I didn't catch it. Is it draft or final, the emerging priorities report?
I'll take a crack at the answer, and then Amy and Ryan, please jump in if you have anything else to add. I mean, I think this is a deliverable that's a snapshot in time that tries to summarize a really high volume of research and feedback that we received in kind of a thematically digestible way. So it's a document that exists, but it is not equal to the final plan. I think this discussion right now is great to give us feedback of areas we might want to lead into a little bit more as we continue developing the plan. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. I think it does. I mean, I think to put it another way, the emerging priorities report is essentially final, but its title is emerging and it's not,
It is not.
it's not
Yes,
emerged,
exactly.
right? Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Lynette.
Sure. I really appreciate the report. I echo what Kyle said and Jen said about mode shift. One area that we saw was kind of missing, and it kind of goes to the same point that Jen was making, is rail infrastructure, and specifically rail infrastructure related to safety elements. So grade crossings, grade separations, and looking at that. But also, as we're looking at the freight network, we need to keep in mind that Metra, in order for us to provide our service, we are on their rail infrastructure. So that's a really important piece that we don't own all of the rails that we operate on. We have to negotiate with our freight partners to get windows, to get signals, to get dispatching, to allow our trains to go through. So I would like to see us have a bit of a discussion about prioritizing and making sure that as we talk about capacity for the freight system and the rail specifically, that we are also keeping in mind that commuter rail needs to play in that space as well. I'll do case in point, we pulled some service back during COVID, and we have not been able to negotiate with the freights to get those time slots back, which is why you haven't seen us put all of our service back on all of our lines. And it's just a question that as we pull back service, when we try and put it back on, we have to go through that renegotiation piece with all of the freights. So grade separations, rail safety, and just the commuter interaction between the freights and our commuter service.
Thank you. Yes, Amy.
Thanks for all the work on this. I had some similar comments and some additional ones. I think on mode shift, which I think is a really powerful metric we could be using, that could be used a bunch of different ways, including things like just shift 1 in 5 trips. I think that gets the concern about car. You still have the freedom of your car if you need it, but there's so many 1 to 5, 1 to 3 mile trips we're taking that don't need to be in a car. I had a question about, while I appreciate the fix it first and funding the infrastructure we have, this might be a conversation for another time, but how do we decide when to take infrastructure offline? We have, in the city, 4,000 miles of roadway, not including alleys. Do we need all of those lanes, given the harm of that concrete to other environmental problems as well as safety issues? So is there a point at which we decide not to maintain something and let it fade into natural land? And then just a question on freight and the extent to which we can make it cleaner. Because as you talked about the community impacts, which was really important, I think one of the impacts is literally air quality and sound quality. And we have a long way to go in cleaning up freight. And I know we don't control that, but to the extent that we can support that is meaningful. And then the final thing on congestion and speed, I think it would be helpful to include buses in there, because buses are stuck in traffic. The speed of our buses has slowed down so much over the last, you can tell me, Jen, 10 to 15 years in the city. How do we get buses out of traffic and get them moving, and the positive ripple effects on that and all the other modes?
Yeah, I think all those comments are very well taken. I'm not sure if there was, I think you kind of posed the question about the, system preservation. I don't think we have a super clear answer to that in this moment, but I think it's something that we can explore. But thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, Ryan and Julie. And you had a big task ahead of you to even just encapsulate the goals and objectives for the region and the RTP. And I think what you have shown, on page 5 is reflective of the many topics that, and we've discussed as a committee and as a whole over the years. In terms of what's next, even taking in the feedback, so then what is next for us? We look forward to the policy briefs, which will dive into some topics in more detail then?
I will look to Ryan to correct me, but I think the large deliverable that's coming up next for you all would be an existing conditions report, which will take a look at these key goal areas and provide some data analysis around how are we doing? What are we seeing in these areas that we should be mindful of as we start to think about strategy development? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add, in terms of the policy briefs too, those are with our consultant team, we've partnered to start doing that research and bringing that information forward. As you all might recall, there's a lot of work that we've already done, whether it's with our partner agencies or here at CMAP, but there were some topic areas that came up in conversations or in feedback that we received from our federal partners, where we didn't necessarily have that as well built out yet. And so that's things like the emerging technology, cybersecurity came up in conversations, things around intercity bus and rail, those types of conversations. So we have that research underway right now. That is really kind of helping us to better understand what's the state of play out there, what are the things we need to be considering in this, and those will be coming back for conversations around how do we want to incorporate these things into the RTP. But I think that's kind of on the same timeline as the existing conditions work, probably right in that same timeline.
All right, yes.
Thank you for this report. As many of you know, the tollway is in the midst of our own capital planning efforts. And I think one of the themes, well, we have a lot of the same themes, which is always great to see. But I was pleased to see facilitate government collaboration in there. And one of the things that we've heard repeatedly is that people in the region want to get from point A to point B as seamlessly as possible. And they're not particularly interested in who has jurisdiction over what. And so just really wanted to continue to emphasize that, we're certainly looking at opportunities for enhanced collaboration. I think we have some challenging times ahead of us, and working together, maybe finding more creative ways to deliver projects is something we're really excited about. So I was pleased to see that in here.
Thanks, Karen. Any other comments, questions, discussion? All right. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Oh, sorry about that. Yep.
Sorry, from CDOT's perspective, just plus one on the comments about, addressing mode share and trying to understand better measures. And I think, as I've been listening to the comments, I think this is something that maybe seems sort of intuitive, but I don't know whether it's the role of this plan or how much our plan can help us with this, but understanding what types of actions have what types of leverage on changing mode decisions. This is something that I think there's been a lot of debate and discussion over on projects, and if there's help that could be provided, I think that might help sort of across the board on lots of different projects.
Yeah, and I think in the next congestion management resource group meeting, we're going to start diving into that exact conversation. And as Julie mentioned, yeah, this is kind of that snapshot in time kind of document to help us kind of keep focusing in the conversation, making sure that we're checking in, that we're on the right track, and getting this feedback of, what are we missing that needs to be included, so we can keep making sure we're heading in the right direction. But that, yeah, congestion management space, I know there's a lot. That conversation has been robust, and we've been having some great conversations, a lot of great feedback. And so I know that's going to be helping to shape and help channel into the RTP space, particularly around things like mode shift.
Thanks. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry about that. All right. Anybody else? All right, great. Thank you, Ryan and Julie. I appreciate the time on that, and great presentation, great discussion. Moving on, item 6.02 is our legislative update. Kasha Hart's with us today to provide an update on the 2025 through 2026 advocacy agenda. Good morning, Kasha.
Hi, everyone. We can go ahead to our next slide, please. Thank you all for making the time today. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you.
Hold the microphone a little closer to you, Kasha.
Better? Better? Okay. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you and talk about our 25-26 federal and state advocacy agenda. This was recently approved by our board last month. You can head to the next slide. So we review and update our federal and state advocacy agenda on a biennial basis, so every 2 years in alignment with the congressional and state legislative sessions. Today, I'm just going to provide a little bit of background on our previous agenda, just kind of go over an overview of how we sort of approach updating this, highlight some successes from a previous agenda, and go from there. So as is the case with our previous agenda, we really try to focus this document in alignment with our strategic direction and our core focus areas of transportation, climate, and regional economic competitiveness. We're also, wanting to make sure this document is responsive to any major policy initiatives that we have underway here. Next slide, please. So of course, the advocacy agenda is intended to support implementation of On to 2050 and support implementation of other, major initiatives that we have underway or our partners have underway. But we also try to consider what levers we have available to us at CMAP to effectuate change and how the advocacy agenda can be a tool in service of that. So to that end, the advocacy agenda really serves as a tool to inform policymakers and elected officials with the actions they can take to effectuate change in alignment with our regional priorities. So in deciding how to craft these recommendations, we wanted to make sure, we weren't so specific as to say, pass House Bill 123, but not so broad that measuring progress on these initiatives was not easily measured. Each of our agendas typically has a theme of some sort, just kind of responding to the moment of time that we're in. So the theme of our last agenda was promoting a robust economic recovery from the pandemic. This agenda, which was really developed in the second half of last year, acknowledges that we are heading into a time of economic uncertainty, particularly with the expiration of federal aid, and obviously we're in a rapidly evolving political environment. Next slide. So just a couple of examples of items that we had included in our previous agenda that were successfully implemented. So this first piece around the carbon reduction program that has been integrated into our CMAC programming. USDOT also did establish a Office of Multimodal Freight. Next slide. And then the part report itself served as both kind of an implementation of one recommendation that we had included around enacting a comprehensive strategy to identify sustainable revenue sources for transit. The report is also informing our current advocacy agenda and a number of recommendations around implementation of that. So how do we actually get some of those sustainable funding sources and system improvements over the finish line? Next slide. This is the one, I think, exception to what I said about not including past House Bill 123 in the agenda, but our top priority this legislative session, and you've, I know, heard about this before from our team, but our top priority this session is securing a dedicated annual appropriation to CMAP to support our technical assistance offerings. We are shifting this ask a little bit to really focus on growing our technical assistance program, and we're calling this our Strengthen Communities Initiative. So our technical assistance applications continue to outpace the resources that we have available to meet local needs, and we do have interest from communities on housing, economic development, water supply, water quality issues that we really just don't have the resources to support. So again, this is in the front page, close to the front page of our agenda. Rep. Will Davis has filed House Bill 3784 and recently hosted a legislative briefing with members that provided us with the opportunity to share a little bit more about our technical assistance program and sort of the opportunities that can unfold if we're able to grow that. And the co-sponsorship has actually updated since we made this slide, which is great, and we're grateful to our partners at IML and ISECO for taking positions in support of this initiative. Next slide. And then finally, just to kind of ground us in our approach once more, as you all know, our current surface transportation bill will expire next year, and these are, last time around, we had worked with, I think, a number of you, almost all of you probably, on developing some principles for reauthorization. That document helped identify some of the content for this agenda, but just kind of wanted to put out there that we're looking to have this dialogue again. So as these reauthorization conversations get underway in earnest in the coming months. So stay tuned for more on that in the future. All right, next slide, please. So I won't go through recommendation by recommendation. I'll just kind of touch on some of the top lines that we have included in each section of our advocacy agenda. So first, on transportation, sustainably funding our transportation system obviously comprises a very large share of the recommendations we have included in our agenda, given the imminency of the transit fiscal cliff. As I noted, the agenda really elevates a number of the policy recommendations from the part report, specifically around some of the sustainable funding options that we noted, as well as some of the system improvements. I'll say too, another large component of this section involves making sure our transportation network is safe for all road users. So the speed management paper that we put forward last year, a lot of the recommendations from that paper has informed items in the advocacy agenda as well. Next slide. On the climate front, so the first component here details recommendations around enhancing resilience and reducing emissions and congestion. Of note to this group, this is where we do have some language about reducing emissions from the transportation sector specifically, and really just making more resources available to support these efforts. And the second component we have is around integrated water resources management. We recently published a paper on regional groundwater governance, and that's, I think, one place that we'll be looking in terms of how we can implement some of what we have included in the advocacy agenda. Next slide. And then finally, regional economic competitiveness. So building on the tremendous success of the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, there are several opportunities for our state and federal delegation to support inclusive economic growth in the region. Recommendations in this section cover a number of different sectors, from economic development to housing, modernizing tax policy. Related to the transportation sector in particular, we also have some items in here around strengthening and improving the efficiency of goods movement in the region. And I think this concludes our quick overview of the advocacy agenda. We have physical copies if folks are interested in reading more, if you want to peruse online. But we're happy to take any questions and talk further about any of the items we have included in there.
Great. Thank you, Kasha. Any questions or comments for Kasha? Yes, Amy or Aaron.
Kasha, I wanted to say thanks for running through that. I think as you were talking about that, I realized I neglected to share with you that at my time in DC a couple of weeks ago, we did have a chance to talk to Senate EPW staff and the House T&I staff, and then there's another Commerce who oversees the transit legislative language for the federal transportation titles. The staff are already starting to put pen to paper, or I suppose pencil at this point in time, on reauthorization principles for the next transportation bill, which expires in 2026. And they're really looking for ways to improve planning, performance measures, to make the planning process more efficient and procurement timelines more efficient. And so I think as we think about what we as a region want to put forth and work together, I think like we had the last time on these reauthorization principles, we as a region it would behoove us to start having conversations about where we see opportunities for us to streamline and provide those exact examples to our congressional delegation, the authorizing committees as they begin to work on these things. So know that it seems early, but a lot of the policies are already starting to be discussed here, and they're interested in hearing very specific examples that would improve the planning process, the programming process, performance measures, and how we might use them more effectively here. So.
Yep. I got it. No.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
So I have one nightmare that's even worse than getting steamrolled by the entire transportation committee. And that is, could you see this current administration viewing MPOs as an impediment to effective state DOT operations and perhaps move to eliminate MPOs? I always wondered in the first administration if that might be coming, but I wonder in this administration, which seems much more aggressive in streamlining government operations and again, prioritizing state DOTs over cities, whether you see that as a risk of elimination or tailoring back of MPOs.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think that there are lots of things that are probably on the table that were unexpected. Our associations, the National Association of Regional Councils and the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Association of MPOs, are working really hard to build partnerships with NACO, National Association of Counties, with NATO, which is development organizations, and with AASHTO. I think our states recognize, I know Illinois does, and I will say that even from my peers that happen to be big regions and red states, know that they couldn't do this work to program all of these federal dollars without them. And we sort of provide that glue. And so we are working on a strategy nationally for talking about our value to all of our partner agencies. I can't predict the future, but I know that the way that we're written into the rules and the state planning research funds that fund the UWP or UPWP programs are considered part of the core federal transportation dollar programs. And so as they look to reauthorize the federal transportation bill, I think that puts us in an okay spot. Usually an optimist, I'm picking okay. Okay spot. So, the core formula programs, I think, are what states really care about. And because we're embedded there and not a discretionary program, this last bill had a ton of discretionary programs. I feel like that is the place where we are going to see the biggest hit, especially because a lot of those programs relied on transfers from the general fund and not from the highway trust fund. So long-winded answer. I'm hopeful that we're continue to show our value. I would hope that that continues.
All right, any other questions or comments for Kesha? Yes, Jennifer.
Thanks for the update and appreciate the support for finding sustainable funding for transit in the agenda. Wondering sort of in the very near term, if there's anything to say about advocacy, particularly with respect to the funding sources, right? A lot of the bills in the discussion have really focused on reform, which is an important part of the conversation, but the part report was also about the actual potential revenue streams and funding sources. And the discussion will hopefully shift to include that soon. So just wondering what your thoughts are or plans are on that.
Yeah, so we tried to be really intentional with the part report and emphasizing that it's a three-legged stool and all these pieces are pretty critical to function together in order for us to successfully kind of tackle this fiscal cliff and everything that comes with it. So regarding some of the fiscal elements of the part report, I know the cornerstone of our recommendation was really around modernizing the sales tax. So we are working with partners right now to put forward, I think, some additional research and information on what that could look like, and just provide a little bit more information for implementers in terms of, if that is a solution that the General Assembly is inclined to pursue, what are some additional considerations, kind of going beyond what we already have in the part report and those supplemental memos. So that is underway right now. But we're also, I think, more broadly just looking to continue to engage in dialogue with members as they have questions about the report, wanting to kind of unpack what's in there. It's a lot to digest. So we're always happy to offer, briefings, conversations to unpack what some of our recommendations are. But I do think a lot of our efforts right now are focused on sales tax modernization.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
All right, any other comments? All right, thank you, Kasia. Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 7. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward today? All right, seeing none, moving on to item 8, public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that is put in to make a comment today? Seeing nothing. All right, online, if you are online, please notify staff by raising your hand, using the raise your hand function, and then staff will identify you before addressing the committee. Okay, Garland?
Yeah. How you doing? It's Garland Armstrong from Des Moines, Iowa. I just want y'all to know this past Sunday, I turned 59. I'm still celebrating my birthday. I'm here at the Applebee's in Altoona. So just want y'all to know about it. And also, too, I just would like an update on has RTA and Metro and Pace, are they finally gonna put the address in Summit, especially like for a Center and Hanover Street where the Amtrak and the Metro Heritage Corridor stop is, so that one day when people with disabilities coming from Springfield getting off of Amtrak and the paratransit will be waiting for them, they would like to know, are they going to have an address in there so they can put it in their system? And also too, I hope Elmhurst, Representative DuPage, I hope for Elmhurst, are they working on one day for Elmhurst? Are they going to try to put like a bridge or an underpass, especially like if they're on the north side for the inbound UP West Line train, and then all of a sudden the freight train stop and they made announcements it's going to be over on the south side platform. Are they going to be working on getting either a ramp or an elevator so they can get to the other side? Because as you know, in Elmhurst, they only got stairs, no ramp or elevator, especially for those with special needs who have to take Metro but they can't use stairs. What are the alternatives for them? Because they feel like they can't even handle stairs going down through that underpass or something like that. So are y'all working with the city of Elmhurst to make sure about that? Because before I left, they never have something like that in Lombard. And I think Elmhurst, now's the time, should have it along with Villa Park and others in the DuPage County if the freight train stops at those stations and then people are trapped and they can't even get to the other side. So check on other stations and what can they do about it to make sure so they can be extremely well prepared for this. Because if the unthinkable comes, they don't like that word lawsuit coming. So what y'all can do to help out for those communities there, like in DuPage County, to make sure, especially for the UP West Line stations and other areas too, if the unthinkable does happen like that. So I just would like to any comments or suggestions or from any of the committees and anything else they can think of.
Awesome. Thank you, Garland. Yeah, I saw everyone feverishly taking some notes down there. So appreciate the comments and getting those noted down and they'll look into them, get back in touch with you. Any other comments you have today?
All right, don't forget my birthday.
Oh, yeah. I was going to close out with a happy birthday. And I don't know if Applebee's is the Awesome Blossom or maybe that's, Chili's or something like that, Outback, but have fun celebrating, Garland. Hopefully the weather's good for you.
Yes, it is. It's nice here. It's going to be in the 60s today here.
All right. Well, happy birthday again and have fun.
Thank you.
All right. And that's all for public comment today. Moving on to item 9, next meeting is scheduled. Oh, pause. We have a hand up.
John Paul Jones with Grow Greater Inglewood online.
Awesome. John Paul, good morning.
John Paul, please proceed. It does appear, John Paul, that you're still muted. If you could unmute and proceed, please. Okay, John Paul, we will be reaching out to you. It appears that we're not able to receive your public comment at this time. We can add it later as part of the future meeting minutes that will be distributed after the meeting. So seeing no other comments then, looking around to confirm. Okay, so seeing no other business before the committee, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
By McHenry, seconded by
Kyle. Yeah.
RTA. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? This meeting is adjourned, and we will see you April 25th for the next meeting.
That's for everybody. We've been, MPC has been part of the transit.